to Challenging Paradigm X. Is it necessary to connect the worlds of spirituality and business? Is spirituality all about religion or consciousness? And what role does purpose play in all of this? My guest today is Kat Kugler. She is an independent business strategist, entrepreneur, and podcast host who has worked for many years in the corporate world and has changed her path to become an entrepreneur with a strong spiritual foundation. In 2020, she has founded humanplus, a global platform to support game-changing entrepreneurs and leaders in their purpose journey to maximize their impact on the world and humanity. She is also the host of the in.sync podcast, exploring various tools and ideas rooted in spirituality and science to create better ways to work and live. So if you're interested in the topic of spirituality and business, stay tuned. Hi, I'm here today with Kat Kugler. Kat, it's great to have you here. Please introduce yourself. Who are you and what do you do?
Thanks for having me. I'm very, very happy and pleased to be here and speaking with you today.
Thank you.
Who am I and what do I do? I love that you asked that question. I thought about it before. I like to ask that question as well because I think there's really two ways that you can answer that. On a professional level and, putting some labels on me that people can put in a box and then more of my true essence. So I will share both because people connect with different things. On a professional, boxy speaking level, I am a strategy consultant, an entrepreneur. I used to work for Deloitte in my corporate past before I turned entrepreneur. And so I do some freelance consulting still. And the other part, and that is really what fulfills me, is my two startup projects, whatever you want to call it, which is humanplus, a platform for all things conscious entrepreneurship and leadership. And my podcast, the in.sync podcast, where we focus on connecting spirituality with business. So that's my professional label set of self. But then really, who am I? First of all, I think also that's a question that we all ask ourselves that I'm not sure we'll ever have an answer to, except, we are all consciousness. But what makes me in this lifetime? I think I'm a very introverted person, but I like to connect deeply. I like to have very deep, meaningful conversations. I really suck at small talk. So I'm not somebody who goes to parties and has small talks with 20 people or so. I'm not interested in that. That actually takes a lot of my energy. So I prefer to have a smaller circle of people that I'm very close to. I like, my top values are freedom and independence. And I think that's, you can really see this in all aspects of my life. I need to know that I'm free and then I will be close to people and to things and to situations. What else? Right now I live in Algarve in Portugal, right by the beach where it's idyllic here. I meditate a lot. I meditate for about 2 hours a day. So again, I'm very inward. But when I do go out, then I bring a lot of energy and I love to do things. I am very active as well. I'm a runner. Yeah, I'm many things for many people, I guess.
It's interesting, this topic of spirituality and business, I find. Also because people always used to ask me that how do I connect these two worlds? And for me, it was actually, there was not necessarily a gap between those two worlds. But I'd be quite interested in your perspective of how is it possible to connect spirituality with business? Or what's the sweet spot, or where's the connections from your perspective?
I think right now in the world, it's not very connected at all. There's a lot of unconsciousness everywhere in the world, but particularly in the business world. And also the concept of work-life balance really underpins that, because that basically says that you have work and then you have a life. So both of them are very separate. So you can be a spirit, you can do all of your spiritual stuff in your life, but you cannot really do it at work. And there's a separation of who you are in those different environments. So right now it is not very connected. Of course, there's always people, lots of people are into the world of spirituality and personal growth, but they can't really bring that authentically into the work environment, which is exactly where I see such a big gap to be bridged. And that's what I'm hoping to close, or to at least narrow a little bit with the work that I do by, as I said, with humanplus as a platform, an ecosystem for conscious entrepreneurs and leaders, and help them to remember who they are and help them find back to their purpose so they can be more authentic at work, therefore closing the gap. Because as a leader is more authentic, that allows your people to be more authentic. And similarly to with my podcast, where I talk a lot about how people have done these things, have used spirituality to build massive success in the real world, or share tools and techniques that can help people to, work better, be more productive, be more peaceful, all of this. So to answer your question, right now it's not connected, and that's exactly what I'm trying to change.
Okay, great. Maybe to clarify, I didn't mean it's that there is a lot of spirituality in business, but what I meant was, for me, we are talking about life. So spirituality is part of life and business is part of life.
Mm-hmm.
So of course there's this gap that you say, but people said, how can you do spiritual work and do consulting?
Oh.
It's an opposite. Yes, it is true. We need corporate social. I always say that we need corporate social responsibility. I mean, it implies that corporations are antisocial, and this is also how I perceive how our economic system works. So, of course, there is a major gap. But I was always stunned when people found it surprising that I'm doing spiritual work and I'm doing consulting. I said, yeah, I mean, this is just in your head that you either do consulting or spiritual work. So from this perspective, I actually see it exactly the way you do. And I think over the last 10 years, a lot of it has changed. There's a lot of awareness now for different aspects of things that are connected to the inner self, the higher self, whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think also through the pandemic, a lot of people started to realize that there's something else also important other than just business, and
Other than just functioning.
And just functioning, exactly. So,
Mm-hmm.
so just to clarify that we're actually on the same page, I wonder, maybe could you give us a definition or your perception of what spirituality is? Because I think it's a word that many people use in very different ways. So we know like how you would define it for yourself.
Yeah. I think even a lot of people are being very taken aback by the world of spirituality because they are associated with, I don't know, religion, I don't know the word, but like a clan or so, For me, spirituality is simply a way of living. It includes tools and techniques that let you experience higher levels of consciousness. So, for example, one tool could be meditation. I'm a very big meditation fan that gets you onto a different level of consciousness that literally raises or changes the frequency in your brain and your vibration. Or breath work has the same effect, or yoga, anything that gets you into an altered state of consciousness and that transcends you from purely just smelling, seeing, and there are 5 senses. I'm not going to call them out now, but anything that lets you perceive more of the world that is not visible just with your eyes. And there's so much around you. We are just energy. We are energy in our heaviest, densest form. And people think, I see my hand. Okay, so then my hand must be real. So I don't see anything else. But it doesn't mean that there is nothing around us. There's infinite possibilities, infinite information available in the quantum field that is everywhere. And spirituality, in my view, is just a tool to be able to access that. You could call it also consciousness work. Okay. So for me, it doesn't have anything to do with religion. In fact, I come from a very anti-religious background. So I have nothing to do, I was never planning on getting anywhere there anyway. So for me, it has nothing to do with religion.
And please tell us, why do you do what you do now?
Well, there's no short answer to that.
We have time.
Okay, so essentially, I said it in my intro already. I used to be a management consultant. I was very conditioned when I grew up to follow a certain path. So my parents were both in the corporate world. We always had enough money, but also not like crazy wealth. So it was always that okay, you get a good education. We want you to have a good education, which is very important to them. And then you go and then you find a job in the corporate world, and then and then you have your box, and then that's it, and that is where life ends. And then maybe you want to have children, maybe you want to get married, and that's what my definition of success looked like. I didn't know anything else. So that's the path that I went on to. And I followed it all very, very nicely, I would say. Although even in my teenage years, there were always I was a bit of a rebel because I always felt like, oh, okay, something doesn't really fit here. And but I did it anyway. And then just before I landed my first job, I had this calling to start meditation. And as I said, like my parents, they are not in this world at all. This is not how I grew up. So it was fairly random almost to start meditation. And there's always, as the universe works, you get an opportunity, but it's up to you to take it. So there was somebody in my friend circle who said, I'm going to start a transcendental meditation. And why don't you come along? And it was a course that cost £500. I was in London at that point, and I didn't have the money for it as well. My mom then said, okay, I'm going to pay for it, not knowing what she was doing. And it was the best thing that she could have done, because it was £500. It was a lot of money for me back then. And it was enough money for me also to stick through. So I didn't want to just do it and then leave it, So I was very committed from the first minute on. And transcendental meditation is a mantra-based technique that you do in the morning 20 minutes and in the evening 20 minutes. And little did I know what it would do to my consciousness. In the beginning, it was just helping me focus, staying more focused, having more energy, all of these benefits that they try to sell you on the website that gets people hooked up and try it out. But I very quickly started feeling a sense of relief that I found home, like something felt very homey to me. Something felt really right to me. And I was always like questioning a lot of things, values, purpose, blah, blah, blah. Everyone around me always felt like, what's happening with this girl? Why is she thinking about this? And basically, I think I started this is when really my consciousness, the way I describe it always is I sat in a house, it was dark, it was light because there's lights in it, but all the windows were closed. And the minute that I started meditation, there's one window going up, like after the other, and later on doors open, and then I walked outside. That's how it felt to me. And I stayed in that consulting environment for almost 5 years, and I was really good at my job as well. But I was very removed from it in a way. I was doing the work, I was getting promoted, I was climbing, the corporate ladder as everyone else. But I always thought there's so much unhappiness, there's so much suffering going on here. And why are these people so ego-driven? And why are they so toxic? And why are they, why do they create all of this drama and stuff? But then I also didn't know what was happening as well. I was just in my meditation bubble, And then a few years later, somebody put The Power of Now on my desk at an investment bank in London, in the middle of London. This really doesn't happen like very often. And I read this book. It was a colleague of mine who put it there and said, I think you need to read this book. And everything that Kat Tolle said in that book, I was like, finally, life makes sense. Finally, there's somebody here, who gets it. And then I realized, okay, there seems to be a world out there. So I started really seeking, going on my spiritual journey and reading tons of books and understanding that there's a whole world out there. So I think that was another mini awakening, or big awakening actually. And that eventually also gave me the courage to resign from Deloitte, because I felt like there's something, this environment, I don't like the way people speak, and then this cannot be it, basically. This cannot be it. This cannot be life. There needs to be something more, and I cannot have big enough impact here. So I resigned. And but then what happened, I basically went from one trap just in another trap. And mind you, the universe really does not give me a break. Like everything happens for me like very, very quickly. Other people, they maybe get a few weeks break. Like for me, like one thing after the other. And I thought, okay, well, I'm just going to be an entrepreneur, and then that's going to solve all of my problems. And that's what I did. I co-founded a company in Singapore, which was an e-commerce company. And I very quickly realized, and this is when my intuition started very, very clearly communicating to me, and my guides, and I already knew where this was going. And I already knew this was not in alignment with my purpose. And I had all of these answers already within me, but there was something that was preventing me from actually living it. I thought, like you said earlier, like how can you be a spiritual person and how can you do consulting? So this is how I saw myself. I can be spiritual, but I cannot do this work if I really want to be, if if I really am a spiritual person. Like, this is so much in conflict. Later on, I realized this is all just in my head. But anyway, I had this perception in my mind, oh, okay, my spiritual side needs to stay my spiritual side, and my business side needs to be my business side. But I got very, very clear insights that that is not what it's supposed to be. And I wrote down in my journal at some point, I need to be stopped. I need to be stopped from pursuing the wrong things. Shortly after, the company went down, and shortly after, the Corona pandemic hit. So, words are powerful. And I was like, damn it, I wrote this down. This is what I called in. This is the experience that I called in. And I eventually, when that happened, is really, I say this now a little bit removed, because it's been some time, and I needed to do a lot of work also to release that. But it was very harsh to face the fact that I had known all of these things inside, yet I wasn't acting in alignment with what I knew to be true and what I knew was my purpose. But then finally, I took the guts to do it, because the feeling now is so strong. I just know that if I don't bring this work into the world according to my abilities in this lifetime, I will be in trouble on the other side. I'll come back and have to do it all over again. So that's when I really started like creating my companies humanplus and in.sync, and creating from the heart instead of with my mind.
So what I would be really interested in is, why do you think that you ignored what you actually knew intuitively, that it was not the right thing, or it would go south, whatever that actually was? But how did it happen that...
A lot of self-doubt, a lot of fears, and simply thinking that it wouldn't be possible, because the world operates, as we know, more unconsciously than it is conscious. And I just simply didn't think that my contribution could make a difference. Why did I think that? You're not good enough. All of this, these crazy limiting beliefs that I carry from my childhood. Things need to be a certain way. There's only one path to success. I hadn't seen examples of people who have done it, because I was so in my little path that every time I had a thought of, oh, I need to do this, my mind came in saying, nah, you're not good enough. Nah, no one's going to listen to you. No, this is not worthwhile. So yeah, that is why. And this is why it took me such a long time. Well, actually, not such a long time, but I feel like it was a long time,
And you talked about your purpose before. Is it something you like to share, what you feel like your purpose is?
Yes, absolutely. I think purpose always changes over, your evolution, and as you progress more in life. My general purpose has to do with raising consciousness in people right now, specifically in the business world, and like getting people to remember who they truly are, and getting people to remember their personal purpose. Especially in the business world, we hear a lot of purpose talk, but that's usually company purpose, or we need to be sustainable, blah blah blah. What people forget is purpose is actually threefold. It's the present purpose, your personal purpose, and the company purpose. Ideally, those three things work in perfect harmony together, because that is when life feels really easy and joyful. If they are misaligned, it doesn't. But this is where I see my work right now, helping people remember who they are and raising their consciousness. And I imagine over the course of my life, that might take many different forms. Right now, it's manifesting through my projects humanplus and in.sync, but I am really open to receive and to let the universe now guide me, because when I do it with my mind, it's not happening clearly.
So just to clarify for the people who are not so deep into the topic of purpose, would you like to explain the differences in short only, between present purpose, personal purpose, and company purpose?
Yeah, of course. The personal purpose is essentially what your soul has come here in its current incarnation form to help in the world. And every soul has a purpose. A lot of people are a little bit intimidated when they hear purpose, because they think, oh my God, I need to be the next Elon Musk or so, send people to Mars. But I don't feel like that's me. Your purpose could be as simple as spreading joy in your family or your friends or at work. It could be that simple. But everyone knows what their purpose is if they start to tune in and if they start to listen. Just need to sit down get into a state and listen to what comes through, what feels natural to you, what you're passionate about, and what at the same time solves a problem in the world. And again, this could be as small as I'm just a happy person and I'm spreading joy, right? Your present purpose is, what are you doing in this very moment that is in alignment with your personal purpose? So for example, why am I on this interview with you? Why am I sharing all of this? Because hopefully it will inspire somebody to go and seek their own personal purpose, right? Which is in alignment with my purpose. So if I always ask myself, like, what is the purpose or the intention behind speaking with somebody? If I don't know what it is, then it's just a waste of time, because it's a activity of the ego, but it's not actually in alignment with me. And the company purpose is then what you create based on what you know about your present and on your personal purpose. And not everyone wants to be an entrepreneur, and not everyone should be an entrepreneur either. So you don't have to now think, oh, fuck, I need to do, I need to create this company that solves this and that issue. No, it could also be, you could either contribute to a company that does something that feels in alignment with you, but also, for example, when I worked at Deloitte, I don't even know what their company purpose is. And I also don't care. I never cared. But I knew why I was there, because I wanted to acquire some skills and some competencies and some credibility and all of that. So even in hindsight now, even though I didn't associate with the company purpose, it still served as a way for me to develop what I wanted to develop at that current point. So you could also just join a company because you like the team or because you acquire some skills. And that is how I see that wheel of personal, present, and company purpose. And when they are perfectly aligned, that is when opportunities come up naturally. That's when, you get excited, when you don't feel drained by your work. And that's when you just feel very content with everything that you do.
So I'd be really interested to know, because you talked about awakening moments, epiphanies. Like, what is there one or more specific moments that you would say were really turning points in your life? Or was it more like a steady development in your life?
I think there were moments that were significant, but generally it was more of a transition for me. So there's also two ways of having an awakening. Either there is an event happening that really shakes you to your core, and you wake up and you just see the world with different eyes. That happens to a lot of people. There's even a word for those two scenarios, which I can't remember on top of my head now. But the second one, and I think this is the one that happened to me, is it's more of a slow transition. And I'm still in that awakening process, like most people that are going to the journey. It's a never-ending process anyway. There's always new insights. But of course, there have been moments where I just knew now I need to make a change. For example, when I was in the first example actually is meditation. When I was called into meditation, I just knew in my heart, this is something I need to do. End of story. Didn't make sense, just need to do it. Very strong. And that led me to my first bigger awakening. Then there was a moment in my corporate career where I had a confrontation with somebody, and they said something that I perceived as disrespectful, and I just didn't want to associate with this. And a lot of people then be like, oh, they just complain about the situation. In that moment, I knew this is my sign to get out, and so I resigned on the spot. I said, I need to call you back, and I resigned in that moment. So then again, like, this is just a moment. There was one funny moment actually the other day. I've reflected on this. When I was in Singapore, I was still I was very deep in my spiritual journey, and I've read tons of books during that time as well. And I had this moment of my mind that said to me, you should stop reading so many spiritual books and you should read something business related. And in that moment, I think my higher self spoke to me and said, no. Like, do not get on that track of you need to read business books. You should continue on your path. I remember this so clearly. This was my intuition, my guide speaking to me in such a clear voice. And I didn't immediately act on it, but I remember it now as vividly as it was yesterday. And this was another moment where I think another initiation took place there here. No. Stop running after what you should do. Start doing what you're supposed to do. And then, of course, when the pandemic hit, which was a self-fulfilling prophecy, could have happened in any other way. I wrote down, I need to be stopped. So again, this was a moment of now, you do it now or you do it never. So for me, more like of a ongoing transformation with like certain pressure points, I would say, that make me act.
So you talked about your projects, humanplus, and your podcast. Please give us some more insights into what you're doing now with your projects and
Yeah.
what their purpose is potentially.
Yeah. So with humanplus, I'm creating an ecosystem, a platform for all things conscious entrepreneurship and leadership. So how it started is I wanted to put all of my knowledge about different altered states of consciousness and how you can create these altered states of consciousness in order to find back to your true self, and a few tools in order to identify your purpose, values, all of these things. And I put them into leadership programs that I do with leaders, with small groups of leaders, and put them through an experience. This was the initial idea, to just put that in a format so people can consume it online and also offline, in person. What happened then is that there's sort of a community building around it, and you know it because you're in it. Initially, the idea was to only set that up for people to exchange knowledge and ideas and stuff for people who go through the programs, and I invited in a few of my friends that could give some input. But now what I realize, people actually are seeking that connection with like-minded people, and people want to grow together. So now that we have a community evolving around this as well, the beautiful thing is there's so many amazing people in this community who have also created, their own programs, their own methodologies, and we are now working on ways to co-create together. So I really want to explore the concept of co-creation with people together, because in the old world, it's really all about competition. If I have this program, you cannot have it. Whereas I'm challenging that paradigm really and say, okay, we can all win. So if you have something awesome to share and I have the reach, let's do something together, or let's create a leadership journey together that encompasses elements of your course and then maybe of yours, and then blah, blah, blah. And everyone can win from this. And it's a bit scary because, it's not that this has been done a million times before. So you're like, oh man, I need to think about what's the business model for a model like this, who earns from what, sort of thing. But it is absolutely possible. Beneficial partnerships, mutually beneficial partnerships, and constantly pushing myself away from this competition thinking, because of course it's ingrained in my mind. And it's beautiful though to see now that we are onboarding a number of co-creators in the next couple of weeks, have already started now, and everyone's bringing in their own secret sauce and the network, and it's growing organically. So let's see what it evolves into. But eventually, it is an ecosystem for all of those things. And with in.sync podcast, yeah, similarly here, I have set an intention. I'm really fan of setting intentions and letting life fill in the details, because I find my mind's very restricted. My mind always tries to figure things out, and my mind always thinks it knows everything and knows the best possible outcome for me, but it really doesn't. So what I now do is I share intentions, and I say, listen, I want to raise awareness for topics like spirituality and consciousness in the business world. What is the best way for me to do this? And I have been lucky enough to have received amazing interview requests from people who, have built billion-dollar companies who are using tools like manifestation, visualization, I eat my peanut butter toast in the morning, like the most normal thing. And so that's kind of evolving into a platform where I'm sharing those stories, but also that gives people concrete ideas and tools to do this, and kind of remove that stigma from this does not belong in the work world, because that's exactly where it belongs.
Okay, great.
Yeah. So let's see where all of this is going to go. I don't know.
I'm really interested in, you've experienced the business world, the corporate world, and you're on your spiritual path for quite some time now, and have deep insight from this world. I'm really interested in what paradigms you think need to be challenged in our world today for a better future.
The paradigm of consciousness or unconsciousness, that is what needs to be challenged. So I think change in everything, positive change, only ever starts with the individual, right? And if you operate from a confined level of consciousness and that me thinking, which happens on lower levels of consciousness, you never even get to experience things like purpose. You never even get to think about how can I use technology for the better? What changes need to be solved in the world, really? So there's many people who come into this world who already have that level of consciousness, and these are the ones who build, the future for us, the future of technology, the future of whatnot. And they are challenging all of those paradigms, and that's amazing. But there is a big population still that is in this lifetime who have really untapped potential, and they would see all of these things and they would start thinking in that way if their consciousness would evolve a little bit away from that scarcity. Me first. There's no nothing other than the things that I see. I don't care what the planet looks like for future generations, sort of thing. So all of this really happens when people experience an increased level in their consciousness, and that is the paradigm that I would like to challenge, and especially in the business world, because that is where the money is. And money means power, and money means change, and money means a lot of good things. So this is the specific set of people that I feel called to work with right now, to help them. Or not help them, they need to help themselves, but like accelerate them a little bit.
Okay, and do you have the impression that the pandemic is maybe a catalyst for this development, or do you? I mean, I know a lot of people say, yeah, the pandemic, it's going to be over in a year or two, and everything will get back to normal. And then there's other people who are saying it's the beginning of a new revolution, of a new, even age of humanity, and things like that. What's your thoughts about the pandemic at the moment?
I mean, I definitely think that the pandemic is an acceleration of something that has already started happening a few years ago. So we are now really at a turning point for humanity and for the world. I think the people who say, "Oh, it's all is going back to normal," I think they view life as a very short span of years, whereas humanity has been on the planet now for billions of years, or the world has been around for billions of years, and humans for a good time as well. So only because me, being in my 30s, cannot see what might happen in 200 and 300 years doesn't mean that the change isn't happening right now. So I definitely think that the pandemic is a bit of an accelerator. There might be a point where people go back a little bit or not move as fast as I would like them to move, or humanity to move, but there's no going back. We are always in a constant evolution. I don't know why people say this, even like it's going back to normal. Like humanity has been evolving for thousands of years, like, and now we're in 2020 and we'll go back. I don't think so. We might not move as quick, but we are moving. Has already started, actually. I don't know the year, but a few years ago, this energy has been changing for some time. There's people who can talk about this in detail. I'm not the one.
Yeah, I mean, Daniel Pinchback, who was one of my first guests, he wrote a book on 2012, and he talks about that in 2012 was just the beginning, and that actually in 2021 will be the next. I cannot remember exactly, but I think he said, like, because we had this conversation about, he said, yeah, 2012 was kind of a disappointment for him that not more happened, and so on and so forth. And then I asked him if, well, I mean, for the world to change, let's say this whole 2012 hypothesis is true. For the whole world to change, it won't happen in a day or a year. Maybe it needs a transition time of more than that. And then he said, yeah, actually, there's this and that guy, and that other guy talks about that actually that's true. And 2021 or 22, there will be like the next stage. But I'm not exactly sure about the theory anymore. And I'm sure there's alternative theories either about that. So of course, transition periods take longer than just, even in human, like individual lives, when it comes to whole of humanity, I guess it takes longer. So.
Yeah, totally. Even with the type of work that I do right now, and you're doing it as well, I don't know how you feel about it, but the insights that I keep getting is that I'm kind of like preparing right now. It's not my time yet. That's what I know. It's very soon. But even like the type of work that I do, is not everyone is ready for it yet. So everything that I do is kind of like building up to the point where there's a big enough mass for that to be adopted. So I know this even for my own work, and I still keep going because I know we have the process initiated. More and more people wake up. Now it's about reaching the critical mass, and I have no influence about. With my work, I do have influence about it, but I cannot say when that's going to happen. But even I know I'm still early on in the journey. Like this work is going to take off, and my prediction is I keep getting the number 37. So when I'm 37, so in 6 years or so, that's the time frame that I've been getting on for many years already. So I think then there's going to be another big wave. And until then, there will be smaller ones, but that's the timeline.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I fully agree with you. Development circles take a long time. You also know it from business, and transformation processes take a long, long time. And sometimes we believe in the middle of it, so now we're done. But then when we look back 3 years later or 5 years later or 10 years later, we're like, oh my God, then I thought I already arrived or whatever it is now.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, it doesn't mean that it can't happen now, right? But there will be another very big push in a few years.
But it takes time. I mean, and especially when it comes to all of humanity, something that affects all of humanity won't happen in a few months. So
yeah,
it's I don't know, like quantum leaps, how they work exactly, and the from in evolution. Yeah, I think when we look at development cycles in general and transformational cycles in general, it just takes time. Huh?
I think so too. Yeah. Yeah. And, as you said, like most change is happening also gradually. So, you're changing right now in this very moment, like by listening to this conversation, this is initiating a transformation process in someone's mind right now. So people always think, oh, I'm not changing, blah, blah, blah. Well, you're listening to this. And then afterwards, you might look up the new paradigm or you might look up altered states of consciousness, and yes, you are developing every single second. And then at one point it clicks and then it's visible. But doesn't mean that we're not changing all the time. Just humans are weird. They just want to hold on to like what they know. I have the same sometimes.
So finally, I'm really interested when you zoom yourself into 100 years from now, and when your children or grandchildren will think and talk about you. What is it that you want to be remembered for? Or what do you think people will remember you for?
I hope that people will remember me for as somebody who has tried to live as authentically and honest as I possibly can in whatever form that will look like, and that people recognize the effort that I'm putting into like my intentions and helping to advance humanity in my own little way, even if it's just one little person that was positively impacted by my world. So I just hope that people, that's what I would like me to recognize for my authentic self.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time and this conversation.
Thank you too.
So hope to see you back again, and I wish you a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks for staying tuned for this edition of Challenging Paradigm X. If you like this episode with Kat Kugler, feel free to share it with your community so Kat's message gets spread even further. In the show notes, you will find the links to her work. Please hit subscribe and rate my podcast if you liked it. I'd also be glad if you write me a review. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to contact me. Next week, we're up with another edition of Challenging Paradigm X. Until then, I wish you a great week.